back, Patricia. And thank you very much for everybody who's joined us again for our slightly delayed session from this morning. And we have Patricia, who is going to be presenting live from her car. So I'm going to, without further ado, before we experience any more technical difficulties, I'm going to pass over to her. So thank you very much, Patricia.
Anna, thank you very much. It's been a really interesting and very eventful morning. And there's nothing like the challenges we had to make us try and achieve going online despite the rain, the lack of electricity, internet failing, and every possible technological problem one could not foresee. But I'm sitting in my car because it started to rain, even though I was going to sit in my lovely garden. It was sunny about 10 minutes ago. So I'm sorry for the just the adjustments we've had to make. But thank you everybody for joining in and for staying with us for the afternoon session. Because we've had so many technical problems today, which we could not possibly have foreseen, I want to thank, first of all, Anna for her absolute support and making sure that we got online this afternoon, and to Sarah, who's working over in Catapult, and to Breda in the Irish Cancer Society for making all of this possible today. And thank you for joining us for this afternoon session instead. I am going to just get cracking on this and talking to you about considerations you might have about returning to work after a cancer diagnosis. I have been in that position myself in the past, and I also have been very involved in delivering various back to work employment programs through some of the agencies such as FOSS, which is now no longer in existence, and then the Department of Social Protection. So what we're going to do today is we're going to just we're going to have a questions and answer session at the end. Anna is going to moderate that. So if you have any questions, please pop your questions into the chat and we'll deal with those at the end. Thank you for allowing Anna for joining us, first of all. And I'm going to talk to you today about some of the things that might be going through your mind as you think about your own personal situation and the considerations and concerns you might have about returning to work. Now, I believe that when people are physically able to work, it's always a strength. It's always a strength for you. And with all of the changes that can happen in your life, maintaining the part of yourself, which is so important to many and many of us, is a positive thing. And we're often an integral part of who we are. And without it, we can feel very, very lost. Either way, it's a challenging issue for many people, whether you're working during treatment or considering returning to work afterwards, if you've taken a break from work, is how you're going to talk about your situation with your colleagues, if you want to, and your supervisors and your line managers. But if your cancer treatment is over, you may have a number of different feelings. These feelings can be physical, they can be emotional, and they can be mental as well. When you think you're ready to think about going back to work, talking to your employer really is the best place to start. Deciding that a flexible work plan would work for you would be a really good starting point, and it can help you both and your employer to understand some of the concerns that you might have. But before you meet with your employer, you might need to think about some different things. Some of those things are, what your employer can do to help you, what you feel you're capable of doing, and then when and what changes you might need to help you to return to work. So you need to think about those things before you plan to meet with your employer. So discuss those things perhaps at home, with some very close friends, with your family. And the plan that you might like to see happen could include changes to the kind of hours that you work, the duties that you have in your job, or indeed your workplace. Depending on your condition, you may have to change parts of your job. For example, driving or facing the public. Your employer must make reasonable adjustments to help you to return to work. And those reasonable adjustments are the changes that you need to see happen to be able to help you to continue to work. These changes could include looking at the requirements of your role, making sure you have suitable access to the workplace, or providing you with different tools or different kinds of equipment that you need to do your job. It's also important to consider your financial situation. There are considerations around your mortgage or any credit agreements that you might have. These may have changed during your treatment as well. And if you are receiving benefits, returning to work may cause some of them to stop, and that can be a pretty big decision as well. Now, there are places that you can go for advice and for guidance about financial and other issues, which I'll talk to you about at the end of this session. But if you have any questions on those, pop them up on the chat and we'll deal with those at the very end. Now, when you think about making decisions about work, your finances and how your treatment will affect you are usually important factors in making these decisions. I'm sorry if you can hear the rain, it's very heavy here. Your cancer doctor, your oncology team, your nurse, or other healthcare professionals can give you information about how your treatment is likely to affect your ability to work. So please take your advice from them at first. It can be difficult to predict exactly how your treatment is likely to affect your ability to work, but it can be difficult. You may not be able to make a decision about work until after you have started your first treatment. So sometimes you may have to wait a little while to see how that's going to pan out for you. Worries about money and work are really, really common for people who've been diagnosed with cancer, and particularly for people who are self-employed, who may not have access to many of the benefits that are available to people who are in the full-time workforce. If you decide to work during treatment, you may need to discuss your work arrangements with your employer. You can talk to them about those adjustments that they may be able to make to help you carry on working, and I think that's really important to say that. But I would ask you now to think about what are the things that worry you the most about working after a diagnosis or working while you're having treatment. There are some useful questions that you can ask yourself before you make that kind of a decision. Are there any risks to carrying on working during treatment? Will you need to cut back on your workload temporarily? Do you need to think about working in a different way to allow time for rest as well as treatment? Some people do continue working and continue to have their treatment at the same time. Is there anybody who can help me at work in practical ways? And if I do need financial help, where am I going to get that? But when you're making these decisions, what kind of decisions are you actually making? What you decide will depend on your individual circumstances and what you feel is right for you. You can also change your mind as treatment continues, or if your circumstances change. Some people decide to take time off until treatment is finished and they feel ready to return to work. You may decide you want to focus on getting through your treatment and recovering. Other people may carry on working either full-time or part-time during treatment. If people are in a senior or management position, they may feel under pressure to carry on working or go back before they feel ready. This can be very difficult. But talking about your concerns and options with your HR advisor, your oncology team, and family and friends can help you to decide what might be best for you. Some people find their experience of cancer makes them think about what they want to do with their lives. Some people will decide to give up work entirely or to change career direction to do a completely different type of job. If you decide to work during treatment, your employer should try and support you. You can talk to them about those adjustments they may be able to make to help you carry on working. Some preparations can help you in getting ready to return to work. That's if you decide that you're ready to do that. And we're going to look at now some hopefully helpful hints and tips that might help you to be able to do that. So I would say if you're preparing to return to work, there are some things that you could think about doing. One would be to try to do things that are part of a healthy lifestyle. I think we all know these things anyway, but exercising regularly, 30 minutes every day, eat healthy foods, and try and enjoy some fun activities and take time for yourself each day. And then when you're thinking about actually physically going back to work, live a day as though you are back at work. Because people sometimes forget how tiring work can actually be. Maybe a few weeks before your due date to go back to work, take some time to prepare yourself and build your energy before you return. Some return to work related habits before you can start to work again would be to, for example, start getting up at your normal work time that you would have done before. Get dressed in your work clothes. Take the usual transport or drive somewhere that's as far away as your workplace to get used to that journey again. And try and do some tasks that you often did at your job from home. And maybe as well, try to stay out of the house for as long as you can, as though you were on a work day. And that can be quite a challenge. If you start work at 9 and you finish at 5, you'd have to leave the home maybe at 8 and not come back till 6. Now, how would you spend that day? just kind of rehearsing and getting back to work. And then think of ways to practice the things you do at work. For example, if your job is working at a computer, then you could start by preparing your return by working at home on your computer, or go to the local library and use a computer there. Try to make the same types of files, reports, or presentations that you may have done as though you were at work. And then keep track of how long it takes you to finish those tasks and how tired you feel after you are done. This will help you also to know how ready you feel you are to return to work. If you think then about some of the ways to make your return easier and safer, a return to work from time off for cancer treatment can be hard for anybody, but there are some other tips you can follow to help make your return easier and safer. Some things you could think about are, for example, reducing the number of hours you work. Excuse me, we're falling over here. Reduce the amount of hours you work when you first go back, then slowly work more hours over time. A slow return to work is often the best way to avoid stress or fears of not doing your job well, because people can really feel out of the loop if you've been out for quite a period of time. Ask your employer if somebody else can take off some of your tasks until you're back to work full time again, if that's what you're looking to do. As you gain comfort in doing your tasks, you can do more. Maybe work shifts that let you avoid rush hour traffic, thereby spending less time on public transport or spending time in your car. Or, given the current situation, could you consider, and would they consider, allowing you to work from home? I know that the government are encouraging employers to allow people to do this where possible. This will allow you to save time and energy traveling to and from work. But if you do shift work, you can request to work the same shift consistently to help you to maintain a more regular sleep schedule while you're recovering from cancer treatment. The other thing you could do is try and take a lot of rest breaks during your work day. Take one short break, 5 or 10 minutes for each hour that you work, instead of taking one longer break. That could help during the day as well. And this will also allow you to save your energy and to build your strength to work your normal hours. Something else that might be helpful would be to try and find a work colleague that you get along well with in your first few days back, to help bring you up to date and to retrain you in any new policies or any new procedures or job duties that might be there. And try to find a colleague that you find easy to work with, and ask them if they are okay to help you during your first week back. I'm not sure if you're getting a chance to pop in any questions into the chat, but please do if you can think of any. There are quite a number of places that you can go for further information and for more help. One would be, first of all, I would say the Irish Cancer Society should be your first port of call. Now, normally the daffodil centres are open around the country. They're situated in the hospitals. I know that at the moment with the pandemic that a lot of those services are not continuing in the way that they were, but you can call the Irish Cancer Society nurse hotline on 1800 200 700, and also go to their website cancer.ie, and there's excellent help there. They're also the local community-based affiliated to the Irish Cancer Society cancer support centres, and you can find lists of those also on the Irish Cancer Society website. A wonderful service that I often promote to people as well is the Citizens Information Centres. They have an absolutely fantastic website, citizensinformation.ie, and also they've got centres in every big town in Ireland. Ring them up, make an appointment, or they are absolutely fabulous over the phone, and I would really recommend that you talk to them if you've got any concerns about returning to work as well. The Department of Social Protection, welfare.ie is their web address. They've also got a really fantastic Ready Reckoner on their website that can help you to calculate your potential in-work and out-of-work payments based on the information that you provide. It can help you to make a decision as to whether you're better off at work or whether you're better off to stay out of work with the supports that they're able to give you. The Money Advice Budgeting Service is a national service. It's free, it's confidential, and they're independent. And I would suggest talk to MABS if you've got any financial concerns at all. And they're also able to liaise with your creditors on your behalf with your consent to help you with those sorts of questions that you might have. And then at a local community level, we also have family resource centres. There's St. Vincent de Paul. You've got your jobs clubs. You've got your adult guidance services that are run by the ETB. And there are local education training board centres. And I would say try and just lean on and get as much help as you can while you decide the best decision for you. So look, that's a little introduction to returning to work after a cancer diagnosis. And I'm sorry it's so rushed today, but we felt it was really important to stay with the session and try and link in with people today who really given their time to join us and to come to this year's conference that's online virtually. And it's absolutely fantastic to see it happening this year. And I'm going to just pop over to Anna to see are there any
Okay,
are there any
thank
questions?
you very much, Patricia. I think that was a very insightful talk on certainly highlighting the importance of communicating with your employer and really setting realistic expectations for planning for return to work, and look at a very individual circumstances that somebody has and financial liabilities that they have and responsibilities that to take in all of those considerations so that they make a very balanced and supported return to work. And thank you for those very helpful hints and tips on, I think certainly preparing and having a rehearsed day on returning to work might be very useful for a number of people. We have a couple of questions that have been posted here, and certainly we have somebody who her former employment actually finished because of the pandemic, and she's looking for any suggestions about starting a new job after cancer. What advice would you give to her?
Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot more of these types of situations happening. A lot of people were laid off early on. Some people have gone back to work in the meantime, and they probably will be laid off again once, particularly if they're working in the hospitality / tourism entertainment sector has been probably the worst, one of the worst areas has been hit, and there's no sign of any recovery on that front in the short or immediate term. It's a very difficult one. Lots of people have lost their jobs, and I think we're going to see more of that. But I would say to try and link in with some of the local employment services if you have one. The Department of Social Protection have facilities within their service. There's an office in every county in Ireland, in the big counties anyway, and they've got people there who will help you with considering a return to work and looking at other types of employment. I also would strongly suggest the Adult Guidance Service. They offer a free guidance counselling for trying to reconsider, what alternatives are there for you to return to work, or if you want to change career, they'll also help you to look at that, and they'll help you with your CV, they'll help you with interview skills, and it's a free service. So look it up as ETB.
Okay,
the Education Training
that's
Board.
great advice, Patricia. Thank you. And I think certainly a cancer diagnosis can often be a cathartic one, and that it gives us the opportunity to embrace a kind of something new for us and something very positive for our future. Yeah. We've had a number of people who are talking about the later side effects of cancer and how that's affected their return to work. One of our attendees has mentioned that she said that it was really a fog, and that she felt that it was nearly 3 years before she really felt able to meet her work expectations. And to think positively about returning to work without worrying about it. And I think the later side effects from heavily pre-treated patients is a huge consideration. And I think certainly what we'd be recommending is that it's we're asking for reasonable adjustments to your work schedule to enable you to work. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think people need to be, I think you're saying as well, Anna, is to just be, I think in the first instance, if you know what you need, I think it makes it easier to ask. If you don't know what you need, especially when you've been out of work for quite a long time, it seems even more challenging, but it is possible to get back to work. And I think if you're clear with your employer about what's going to work for you, and it's not going to be forever, it's going to be maybe for a few weeks or a few months, that they should really accommodate you with those changes.
And I think certainly you're highlighting how important it is that communication, that you're being very honest and making very realistic, knowing what you will be able to do, and knowing that the expectations you have of your own workload and certainly what your employer expects, that they have to be very clearly defined when you're considering a return to work. And I think most employers are very, very supportive, and they're willing to embrace adjustments to make your workplace much more facilitative for you. Another question here that has just come up is that again, some people are out of work between 18 months to 2 years from work, so people are out of work for a considerable amount of time. So what advice would you give to these people who are preparing for return to work?
I would say that it's something to look forward to. I mean, work is very rewarding. And I think we get a lot from going to work every day. And I think it can be probably quite frightening to think about, going back after being out for such a long time. And your confidence can feel like it's taken a hammering as well. But having a job to go to, and really, as you mentioned as well, Anna, again, and we've been mentioning during the session, is, about the communication and knowing that you have a job to go back to, I think I think that's wonderful. As we've heard already, there are so many people who've been so badly affected by the pandemic. And that's not to say that people who've been out of work shouldn't go back. They should. I think everybody should try and get back to work. And I think really knowing what you want, being clear about that.
I think that's very, very good advice.
Is really a good
certainly,
start.
it's a long time for people to be working. I think there's a lot of fears and trepidation for people when they're considering going back to work on how that will actually, in reality, be for them. And we've had a lot of people commenting here again of this fog, this that's affected their cognitive ability, and fears expressed around that. Have you any tips or hints or tips and kind of brain training or mindfulness to prepare people just so they can have some more clarity going back to work?
Oh, that can be so helpful, Anna, as well. And I think it's about, sometimes we're just really, really worried about going back to work and what it's going to be like and how are we going to cope. What are people going to think about you? What are you going to say to people? You don't have to share that information with your work colleagues if you don't want to. But I think that calming your mind, I think, is going to be really, really useful. And I think that there are some wonderful free meditation exercises there to be found on YouTube. They're freely available on the internet. And I think even just starting with 5 minutes a day, just to get that sense of calm.
And I think a common thread from the comments that have been posted here is that there's a lot of anxiety about returning to work and people feeling pressured to return to work. And certainly I think, those hints and tips, and so that people have to be psychologically ready to return to work. And I think you have to be kind to yourself. You're on a road to recovery, and like with your cancer treatments, it wasn't a rushed, neither can your return to work be. It's something that you have to plan for, like you have suggested, to rehearse for, and to accept sometimes some of the limitations that we now face. And, that acceptance will help us in our workplace if we're not pressurizing ourselves. I think a lot of the pressures seem to be from the people themselves, that they're putting that expectation on themselves rather than their employer.
There is, and I think people need to remember, that when you're out on sick leave from work, that's a protected period, for you to be able to have that recovery. And I know also from an employer's point of view, an employer has to know when a person is coming back because they need to plan to bring you back to work, and they want to give you the supports that you're going to need to be back at work. So I see both sides, but I think that really for people who are, on a cancer journey, I think that they need to give themselves as much possible time as you can before you go back to work. I would suggest not rushing back to a full-time job. I would say try and just do a few hours to start with. Start really, really gently and work up, and start firmly with that in mind before you go back. Say to your employer, I don't feel up to doing 5 days a week, but I would love to do, let's say, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and do maybe 5 hours a day instead of doing 7 hours a day, and try and negotiate something that you feel is really, really doable.
And I think that's very good advice, that it's really a phased return to work, either by working the shorter days or alternate days until you feel you're really able to embrace being back in a full-time position. And certainly for some it may be that they will consider, you know, staying on part-time hours and not resuming their full-time hours. But that's something that has to be decided on a very individual level, and you won't know until you try. But we would certainly agree that it's a phased reintroduction would support you, and you do accrue annual leave even when you're out on paid sick leave. So maybe it's to use those additional hours that you've accrued so that you can actually have a phased reintroduction to your work. But again, it's, I suppose, all down to communicating with your employer and agreeing, making some agreed changes to your workload. Yeah.
They're all good ideas, Anna, as well. You know, the whole idea of using your annual leave is something I think we discussed last year at the conference as well. And a lot of people thought that was a really, really good idea, because that, you know, that's that time that you can say, well, I'm coming back now and I'm going to use one of my annual leave days a week to be able to phase that in over the next few weeks. And your doctor also can suggest and write a letter for your employer to say, look, I'm suggesting that you know, this person works no more than 3 days a week for the next 3 months, for example. You know, other people can support you with providing letters and documentation, your GP, your physical therapist.
Absolutely, and one of our suggestions here on the comments is that there are cancer rehabilitation cognitive rehabilitative therapists who can actually help you rebuild that kind of stamina and endurance we need to cognitively for most of us to do our work. So the resources absolutely are out there, and speak to your oncology team or to your GP, you know, to support you in return into a safe and supported return to work. Is there, I think that's most of our questions. We have a lovely comment here that someone said that she wished she had a button that she could like, you know, that she just feels pressured to return to treatment. And it's really just to say to people not to let that pressure, and that it is actually all a negotiation, and it is about having that open dialogue with your employer. And for some, maybe it is, you know, a choice to make as to, is this the job for you to return to, you know, and what is the most important part of that your cancer may have changed in your life, that you embrace something new, you know. But certainly a lot of people are commenting that, you know, it's that brain fog, it's that uncertainty, it's that lack of confidence, you know, that we definitely are recommending people are to seek reports to, because they're certainly not alone in feeling that.
No, it's very common, and I think just take the time, you know. I used to say that nobody's going to thank you for coming back to work early. Just take as much time as you need and really try and benefit from all the services and the people that can help you. And Anna and I were talking before we came online for the session that, you know, the Irish Cancer Society Daffodil Centres really are such a blessing and such help. And the nurses there will talk to you, and they're available. And the nurse helpline through the Irish Cancer Society is also a wonderful service. So really try and not feel on your own with all of these feelings that you have and with the symptoms that you feel that you're still showing. Because you know,
absolutely, we can learn by the lived example of that other people and how they've got through it, and use their expertise and their, you know, by sharing their stories and how they overcome, you know, things like brain fog or their stamina or their endurance, you know. And like we said, the Daffodil Centres, you know, we're on a phased reopening, you know, some of it but we're still working from remotely, so they can, you know, as the numbers you give out, they can contact the cancer support line and seek that support one-to-one with one of our nursing staff. But I'd certainly like to thank you very much for the extraordinary lengths that you have gone to today to actually give this presentation and to share your expertise with. I definitely think you've done a blinder today. Really, thank you very much, Trish. And I think probably all of our viewers today will appreciate the lengths you've gone to, just to, not everybody would be willing to sit in their car, in their garden, to actually facilitate a presentation. But thank you very, very much. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. No, it's a pleasure to be here. You're very welcome. I've been attending the conference probably for about, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years, I suppose. I haven't missed one yet. And today was going to be no different. So, you know, the society was very good to me in the past as well. And I've been involved with cancer support services in the community as well. So I think it's an incredible organisation. And I think that everybody who works in it really does absolutely fantastic work. And thank you everybody for joining us today as well, and for waiting for the session.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you again for all the work that you have done, and for everyone who's joined us today for this session, and look forward to having your continued support over the next coming years, and wish everyone a safe and healthy supportive return to work when everyone feels ready.
You too, Anna.
You know. Absolutely.
Yes, of course. And
absolutely, we look forward to
next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye now.
Take care, Anna. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
We look forward to it. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye, 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 everybody.